Hi, I'm Brian Moore. I'm on the music education faculty in the Glencorf School of Music at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. I'd like to share with you some ideas that I have on the teaching of music composition. You're a future music educator, and I know that you're prepared to share your love and your passion of music with future students. And that probably assumes that you've got a great interest in performing and also having students learn how to listen to music. I'd like to have you think today a little bit about what about the role of music creativity as music composition, how you can be a composer, and how you can help your students enjoy that passion and share that passion with you as well. I'd like to share with you a 7-step process that I use myself when I'm composing pieces, and I've also shared it with my students, both high school students and undergraduate students, when I ask them to actually create a piece. And the first step is to find an interesting problem to solve. Once you've done that, the next thing is to actually create something, anything, what I'm going to call mini solutions, little ideas that you can use to get to the next step, step number 3, in which you create the first draft of your piece. This is the first time you're going to hear your piece as a whole. When you've gotten that first draft done, the next step, number 4, is to evaluate it. Part of that leads you into step 5. You're going to answer some questions. Do I need to revise my piece, or do I think I'm done? If I need to revise, you might need to go all the way back to step number 2 in which you created something. Maybe you need a little more. Or you might need to go back to step 3 and maybe you need a second draft or a third draft as you do part of that revision. Step number 6 is, if you're all done, stop and analyze your piece for future use. There might have been some new techniques, some new ideas, or some really creative thing that happened. You want to remember that because you might want to use it in another piece at another time. And finally, step number 7, you've worked really hard on this great piece of music. You want to share it both with yourself and with others. And there's so many ways of doing that. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So what I want to do now is take each of those 7 steps and kind of walk you through it and actually give you a little bit of an example of what that might look like. So first, finding an interesting problem to solve. One aspect of being creative for a lot of people is actually, what is it that I'm trying to solve creatively? And that first problem, if you will, they find very exciting and very engaging. So one of the things you have to ask yourself, and maybe ask your students as well, do I want to have a clean problem or a messy problem? And what I mean by that is, do I want a problem where the parameters and the rules, if you will, are really clearly defined, almost a recipe approach? Or do I want a more open-ended problem, more of a messy problem, where I want to try to do trial and error, and I don't really know the direction I want to go in, but I don't mind if I make some mistakes and try some things. So that might help you just determine whether you want that open-ended or that kind of well-defined problem. Another aspect to look at the problem to solve is it internal or external? Meaning, am I finding the problem myself, or is someone giving it to me? There's value in both approaches. If you pick the problem, the musical problem yourself, you're probably pretty interested in that. If someone else assigns it to you, like a professor, you might say, well, this is work, but I'm going to have to do it. But perhaps that professor or that person who's giving you the problem have thought about some things that you've not thought about, and so it's a different perspective, something you wouldn't have thought of on your own. Then you also might want to think about the intended audience. Who am I writing my music for? Is it for myself? Am I writing it to be performed by some other musicians? Maybe I'm writing for a 6th grade general music class that they're going to be playing classroom instruments. Maybe it's for a high school band. That makes a difference in how you might approach your piece. Think of what a professional composer does when they're given a commission. They have to write to the needs and the uniquenesses of the ensemble that they're working with. And the problem to solve somehow has to be based in musical thinking. You'll be using elements of music. Maybe you want to try to paint an emotional picture with your music. All these things kind of fall into play when you're trying to find something that's really interesting to solve. Well, for this purpose of this little talk here, I thought, well, I should try to do this myself. So I'm actually going to try to create a little musical problem for you. I'm going to go ahead and try to come up with a piece that is really short, obviously, because I don't have much time. And I'm going to go ahead and do it on GarageBand on my iPad. And I thought what I would do is base it on today's date. So this is February 5th, 2014. Just pulled that date because it's today. We just got done with Groundhog Day. So somehow I'm going to try to make a piece that I can connect somehow to February 5th, 2014. We'll see how I do. So step number 2 is to create something, anything, what I'm going to call also mini solutions. You're trying to get some initial ideas, what you might want to call a germinal idea, something that you could use to develop to create a larger piece. Three approaches you could take in this. One is the elements of music. Music has melody, it has harmony, it has rhythm. So within that, maybe there's a chord, maybe there's a particular musical phrase, maybe it's a rhythm pattern that just comes to you that can be the basis of more content and maybe even be the basis of your piece. Sometimes some people like to think about what emotion do I trying to express in my music? Is there a mood? Is there a feeling? Am I trying to write a piece of music that portrays happiness? Or maybe it's going to be a piece of music that is going to accompany a photo, and that photo kind of is a pastel in colors, and I want to have a muted feel to my piece of music. You can kind of make those decisions. The third thing to think about is perhaps that you want to find ideas that are external to the piece of music. Maybe you literally want to start with a poem, or you want to start with lyrics that will become the basis of where you'll get some other ideas. Any one of these three things in combination will help you get something down, some of those ideas that will create those mini solutions. At this point, we're not trying to worry about labeling anything. You're just trying to get some music down. We'll worry about what that is later on at the end of the whole process. So my mini solution is taking today's date, February 5th, 2014. I'll turn it into 2, 5, 1, 4. And so I'm simply going to use those notes 2, 5, 1, and 4 from using my piano keyboard on the iPad. So I'll be basing it on D, G, C, and then F. Now, third step is to develop that first draft. You're trying to take these little ideas that you had and try to put them together, trying to create something that will hold together as an entire piece. Some things to think about is maybe brainstorming. Try to get as many ideas down as you can, but maybe you have too many ideas or perhaps not enough. Try to make connections between those ideas. Do some of the fragments work together? Do they work as transition? You also might want to think of variations. Perhaps this little fragment that you had could be transposed or flipped upside down, played backwards, a lot of different things that one could do. And you're trying to find ways of having balancing and pacing in your piece. It's good to think in relationships and think about how we listen to music. We have to remember things in time. A piece of music that takes 1 minute takes 1 minute to enjoy. You have to remember what happened a minute ago. As a composer, you need to be putting yourself in the phase of the listener. They have to do the same thing with your piece. So take that first draft, and this will be your chance to kind of hear the whole thing put together. So in my example on the iPad, I put in our first little loop, and then I simply used a copy-paste technique and pasted it into a second track to get a different timbre. I'm using the same content, but because I'm changing instruments, it sounds like two different parts. I'm also going to use the copy and paste and try to take my little phrase and slow it down and have that become a third part. I'm trying to find ways of having unity throughout my piece, and as you look at the track icons in the GarageBand app, you can see the relationships, and visually you can see how the music relates together, and you can hear it as well. At this point with this first draft, you now have to do some evaluation. Try to have to decide what's working, what's not. You might try to listen to your piece as if you're hearing it for the first time. That might sound like a kind of hard thing to do, but literally make believe that you're hearing your piece for the very first time, and as you listen to it, does your ear stay with the piece? Is it captivated? Do you find yourself getting bored? Do you lose track of what the piece is trying to say because maybe it's too many things going on at once? You also might want to think about evaluating it from the standpoint of the performer. Will this piece be too difficult to play or too easy to play? And from a listening standpoint, how engaged do you sound? I sometimes like to use with my students, especially with all the technology, would you pay 99 cents for your tune? Now, once that evaluation that you've done is complete, you have to make some decisions. And the question is revision question mark. You might decide that you need to go back to maybe getting some of your initial ideas. You need more of those. You might need to do some more work with your first draft. This might be a good time to ask someone else to listen to your piece and get some constructive criticism, some suggestions. You might decide too that, you know what, this piece is done, I'm ready to move on. Now, as an aside, working as you will be with students in the future, you might find that some of your students would prefer to write a brand new piece than go back and rework an old one. So you kind of have to get a feel for how those students are as individuals. Sometimes that's okay. There's also a place to say, you know what, you need to go back and really rework this, improve the piece. That's hard work, but the effort might pay off in the end. Now that your piece is all done, this is where labeling can occur. This is where we can worry about things like, what chord progression did I use? Is there some kind of theory technique I applied, or some kind of a term or vocabulary that might come in handy? The reason I say it's good to put that here is it helps you understand, why did this piece work? How could I take these ideas and use them in the future? For example, I always tell my students, I remember the first time in music theory class when I was a freshman, where a teacher was playing a Neapolitan sixth chord. I thought, this is the coolest sound I've ever heard. How'd you do that? Once I understood the theory behind it, I can recreate that sound for my own use later on. You will do that with the pieces you put together. There might be something that you do that once you label it, you say, hey, this is good. I can reuse this and have this work again. I also include at this point those extra musical things that are really important. What's the title of your piece? Do you want to think of it as part of an album? If you're going to publish it digitally, what's your album art cover going to look like? Are there any program notes you might like to put with your piece? All this is an important part, I think, of making your piece kind of a finished thing and getting it ready for the last step, step number 7, in which you actually share your piece. You want people to enjoy it. You've enjoyed writing it. You want to share it with some other people. And there's a lot of great ways of doing that. The technology certainly comes in very handy to do that. But it might be a live performance. It might be a multimedia situation. You might be using it as background music for student production. A lot of schools will put on, if you will, a student news station, and perhaps you can be doing background music for that. All those different kind of things are helpful so you can share that music and have a chance to hear it. In this example I did for you, I obviously used an iPad, and I really enjoy using the technology. I think for me, it kind of empowers you to do some things you couldn't do without it. My piece was in multiple parts. There's no way I can play all those parts on the different synthesizers and instruments at the same time. However, the technology is just a tool. Just because I know how to use a word processor does not mean I know how to write a novel. Just because you know how to use something like a GarageBand doesn't mean that you are automatically making smart, intelligent musical decisions. It does take some practice, but you can use it to elevate your abilities to do that and maybe move through some things a little faster. I like to think that the technology can really extend your reach and extend your ability to be creative in music. I'd encourage you now, as you're thinking ahead to be a future teacher, try doing some composing on your own. If you feel comfortable doing composition, you can be sure that your students will feel comfortable as well. If you're scared to do it, they're going to be scared to do it. And to go ahead and take some compositional risks, go ahead and try to create some content, some lessons, some units, apply that to all aspects of your teaching, and let's turn out the next generation of great composers and enjoy yourself being passionate about music and music making.